Hello and welcome to Earth Sensory Perception. I'm so glad you're here and that you accepted the call to remember your nature intuition. Something called you from deep within, your inner wild child perhaps, and you listened. My name is Johanna DiBiase. And this is Module 0, the what, why, and how of nature intuition. So what is nature intuition? Nature intuition is connecting deeply with the more than human world through sensory experiences and extrasensory experiences, as well as connecting with our inner nature. Because we are nature. Literally, 70% of the earth is made of water and 60% of the human body is made of water. We are nature, literally. So during respiration, we exhale carbon dioxide, which trees then take in and use for photosynthesis before they exhale the oxygen, which we use for respiration. So we are an integral part of this ecosystem. We are not outside of nature, separate from it. We are part of it. Another example of how we are nature, literally, is that the human body is made up of 1,000 billion microbes in your entire body, your gut, skin, everything is made up of living life forms. So our body is an ecosystem. This, I think, is also a really interesting way to look at how we are nature. If you look under a microscope, the mandala of the red human blood, you can see in this picture, and the green chlorophyll are identical, except that chlorophyll has magnesium in the center of the atom, and human blood has iron for their central atom. And I guess that's why chlorophyll is called green blood. So we're like basically plants, right? Okay, another example of how we are nature, literally, and I think this is really the prime reason for why we are nature, is because everything is made up of these 6 elements: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. And I don't know if you say it chnops, C-H-N-O-P-S. We'll say chnops. They make up all life on Earth, including the planet, the plants, the animals, and humans, everything. It's also found in the Milky Way. So we are stardust. Everything is made up of stardust. Again, we are not separate from nature. It is not nature outside of us, forest, rivers, wilderness areas, and then us, human beings, totally different, not the same, right? We are part of our ecosystem. We're part of the earth, part of the galaxy. We are nature. And I'm ready to blow your mind even more. Everything is nature, literally. So I have pictures of here of sneakers and computers and cars and buildings and plastic bottles, because every single thing on this planet is made up of stardust and earth. Everything is made up of earth. So we have this idea, in our head that these things are natural and these things are unnatural. But that's not actually true. We could say plants are organic and plastic bottles are man-made or synthesized, but plastic bottles are nature as well. They're made from petroleum, which is made from dinosaur fossils, which is also made of chinops, right? Of stardust. So yeah, we don't like plastic because it takes so long to biodegrade and return to the earth. And that is definitely something we need to work on. But we also need to recognize that everything on this earth is of the earth. Everything. So being careful how we differentiate between what is natural or unnatural. Everything is natural. Some things, though, are man-made, and some things are organic versus synthetic is a better way to look at it. So keeping that in mind, even in a city, we are surrounded by nature. And I don't just mean to say, like in this picture, well, our salad is nature, and the dandelions growing through the sidewalk, and the butterflies, and the pigeons, and the cockroaches, and the stars in the sky, and the plants, and the trees in the park. Those are definitely all nature, but also the park bench, the human sitting on the park bench, the book she's reading, the buildings in the background. Everything is nature. Everything is made of it. So as soon as you begin to recognize that, we can begin to dissolve the delusion of separation between humans and nature. Okay, so I'm just going to have you take a moment to let this sink in. Everything is nature. Everything is composed of the same material, which I like to call stardust. Everything is interconnected and interdependent. The trees depend on us to breathe. We depend to photosynthesize. We depend on the trees to breathe. The microbes on our body depend on us to survive, and we depend on them as well. The earth is made of water. We are made of water. Everything is connected and interdependent. And once upon a time, we understood this truth, and we lived by this truth. And then everything changed. Okay, so all of our ancestors at one time were earth-based. So you don't have to be indigenous to practice nature intuition. Anybody can do it. And we all have ancestors who practiced it at one time. That's how humans used to exist. So this is a quote from David Abram from the book Spell of the Sensuous. Only as the written text began to speak would the voices of the forest and the river begin to fade. So in David Abram's book, Spell of the Sensuous, he makes a strong case for how the creation of the Greek alphabet in 1000 BCE, so about 3,000 years ago, caused the separation between humans and the sensuous world or the natural world. He says that it is not the Hebraic alphabet, which was an early form of phonetic alphabet, but it was different because it continued like petroglyphs to, or like hieroglyphics to reference animals and nature beings. But when the Greeks took on the Hebraic alphabet, the symbols no longer referenced anything having to do with animals and nature beings because they spoke a different language, but were using a similar alphabet. So at that point, the Greek alphabet became completely disassociated with place, with the sensuous world, and it pulled people out of that connection with the land and into a world of disassociated letters. And he talks about when we read, we are almost having these out-of-body experiences. We lose ourselves in the story and in a way detach from our environment and from the sensuous world, the world of our senses. So this is one theory, that we became detached from the natural world 3,000 years ago with the onset of the phonetic alphabet, the Greek alphabet. And then we have the theory of the Bible. A lot of people believe that our separation from the more than human world began with the Bible, with Judeo-Christian monotheism. Here's a quote from Genesis. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." So that was 2,000 years ago, right? And prior to this point, paganism, with its belief in multiple gods and earth spirits, dominated. And that paganism considered nature divine and humanity as thoroughly enmeshed within it. So when Judaism and Christianity rose to become the dominant religious force in Western society, their monotheism repositioned the divine, or God, and humans as outside of nature. The Old Testament taught that God gave humans dominion over the earth, so begins the separation. There is earth and nature, and then there is us, and we're like in charge. And there's God, and then there's us, and then there's nature. Things begin to separate at this time in our consciousness as humans. So we're already moving away from our connection to the land. And then we have the early 17th century, the Enlightenment, and René Descartes, considered the French father of modern philosophy. And you might have heard the phrase, "I think, therefore I am." And Descartes framed the world as essentially split between the realm of the mind and that of inert matter. So he was just a dude who was trying to figure it all out. He wanted answers, and he realized that he couldn't determine that anything was real, like really real, except for the fact that he was conscious. The only thing that was real was his own consciousness. And then everything outside of it was something else. So essentially, since humans were the only rational beings, we must be separate from and superior to nature and non-human animals, who were just considered mere mindless machines to be mastered and exploited at will. Right? So what we have here is what's called the Cartesian duality. And he believed that mind and matter were separate things. And as well, man and nature were therefore different things. I thought what was interesting was that at one time, the word psyche meant both soul and spirit, but it also meant breath, and translated to the breath of life. But now that we are separating the intellect from the body, The soul and spirit are no longer breath. They're no longer part of the body, of the physical realm. Spirit becomes separate. Soul becomes a separate entity. It's sort of leaving our body now, just as God has left our body, just as nature has left our body. Everything is getting separated out. So it further perpetuated this shift in human consciousness away from our connection to nature. And then I don't have a slide for it, but also what we have right now, Newtonian paradigm, reductive science. It's also very much about empirical evidence, and it doesn't allow much room for anything that's metaphysical or supernatural, anything that could occur without being analyzed and rationalized and make sense intellectually to us. And that has continued to perpetuate anthropocentrism, right? So anthropocentrism is the belief that humans are the center of the universe and is embedded in Western religion and philosophy. Anthropocentrism regards humans as separate from nature and superior to nature, and therefore is having every right to exploit nature. Nature in this case includes everything outside of humans: animals, plants, minerals, water, air, soil. So that's basically where we're at. That is the main way that our society, our overculture, sees the world, and how we were taught about the world as well in school. So I have here more about duality, and I have on one side yang, which also represents masculine energy. This is not men. This is just masculine, yang, and yin, which is feminine energy. Again, not women. So masculine, feminine, the way I'm talking about them here are just characteristics like yin and yang, hot and cold. They are opposing forces in the universe searching for balance, right? Aren't we all? So if you look at this list, on one side, yang, masculine, here are the characteristics: the human world, the intellect, active, extrovert, tough, perfectionism, advancement, domination, concrete ideas, things that are understood, reality. And then here are yin attributes. And granted, I picked and chose, but the natural world: body, passive, introverted, sensitive, imperfection, retreating, surrendering, abstract ideas, mysterious, dreamy. And when you look at these two side by side, which characteristics are more valued by our Western society? Specifically here in the United States, we have a very strong capitalist economy system that has gone pretty global at this point. You can see that the yang characteristics are those that people are striving for. I do believe things are shifting now, and people are beginning to see that this kind of hustling and 80-hour work week and such are just not working. They're not healthy for us. And so I do believe things are shifting now. But overall, most people still value these masculine characteristics. And so that has led us to this hyper-masculine culture. And I like to say hyper-masculine culture, but also things that fall under hyper-masculine culture are patriarchy. You might have heard these terms are pretty common in the zeitgeist right now. Colonialism, white supremacy, consumer culture or capitalism, And I think there's another one, and the climate crisis. So these are all elements of domination or hyperactivity, right? Just like the masculine characteristics. And they're all caused by a lack of balance. So we need to bring back the feminine in order to restore balance. We need to start bringing back those characteristics that are more yin to restore balance. We don't want to go all the way yin and be completely, passive and inert. We just want to find the balance so that we don't work 51 hours a year and take 1 week off for vacation, right? Vacation being yin and working being yang. So that's out of balance, right? All right, I'm going to introduce you now to animism. So if you're like me, I'm a Gen Xer, so I grew up in a conventional public school system. The way I was taught about animism was that it was just mythological, superstitious nonsense. Okay, but I don't believe that anymore. This is a quote from Asia Schuler's book, Mirrors in the Earth. Mirrors in the Earth. Animism is the heritage belief system of humankind, right? So at one time we all were animistic. Though animism disappeared in some parts of the world with the arrival of human-centric religions, in other places, especially lands still tended by indigenous peoples, animistic belief systems continue to underpin entire societies. In animism, everything is seen to be awake and alive, animated by an intangible essence that one might call chi, spirit, soul, sentience, or simply life force. Everything from baskets to stones and ideas and archetypes is seen as having its own self and inner being. Animism is, in essence, a religion of personhood. It is a belief system that acknowledges our world as a co-creation among equals. All right, so another way to think of it is that the great creator or the great spirit or the life force, God, the universe, whatever you want to call divinity, that thing that is bigger than just us, that invisible force that is outside of us connecting all things. If we imagine it as one great consciousness, and so instead of the mind being superior to matter, the mind is the creator of matter. Everything in existence was created from consciousness. And therefore, everything is a fractal, a fragment of consciousness. Not just organic matter like animals and plants and stones and landscape formations, and not just concrete matter like buildings and cars and computers and plastic bottles, but even ideas have consciousness. Your art, your crafts, your business, your dreams, they're all fractals of a greater consciousness. In that example, they're fragments of your own consciousness. And as a result, we all share in the greater consciousness. We're all connected and part of the one. And I get that this is not an easy concept to wrap your brain around. I don't expect everyone to be converted to animism immediately. But it's just something to think about. And then I want to talk about the difference between subjective truth and objective truth. So animism entails intersubjectivity. Reality is the lived experience shared between subjects. Every being on earth has its own truth, and all beings and truths are deserving of respect. So in our society, objective truth is more valued. That's kind of what I was talking about before with reductive science. And just as we showed earlier, the masculine value of reality as the one true reality, scientific fact is put above lived experiences in our culture. But there is a place for both when we are in balance. So you don't have to convert to an animistic worldview in order to be a nature intuitive, don't worry. But it is important to open your mind to the idea, especially the idea that beings in nature are sentient, and that idea isn't crazy, but is common in other cultures and worldviews. Animism is a belief in mutual helpful relationships between the human world and the spiritual world, the world beyond dualism, beyond monotheism, and beyond phonetic language. It is the language of the spirit. Anima means soul, the consciousness and breath, physical and spiritual. Remember what I had talked about before? Psyche means spirit and it means breath. Everything is part of the animism network. Humans, nature, and the divine. And I teach yoga too, and I was talking about prana the other day. Prana means both breath and life force as well. And that's a living culture. And you could see even integrated in that how the body and the spirit are still connected. The sensuous world and the world of spirit, of soul, go together. They're one and the same, not separate, as we live by in our modern society, in our Western overculture. All right. So until recently, we didn't even think that animals were sentient beings capable of feeling, which might be why the factory farm industry exists. Many people still disconnect from the torture inflicted on animals and the meat they eat. And now science is bringing to light not only animals' ability to feel as a community and on individual levels, but plants' ability to feel and communicate with each other. And who knows what we'll discover next. So here's just a few ways in which science is beginning to support ideas of nature's sentience. So, like brains that send electrical signals, plants also release electrical signals to respond to their environment and show signs of distress or poor health. So they're finding that plants have a nervous system similar to our own. And I have links here you can click on to learn more about the scientific studies. These are not just things I'm making up. We've learned a lot about trees. Wise old mother trees feed their saplings with liquid sugar and warn neighbors when danger approaches. So we've learned more about plant communication, the mycelia networks that help trees to communicate. Whale communities have active changing cultures, much like our human societies do. So they're discovering whale culture. And crows possess a form of consciousness able to be consciously aware of the world around them in the present. In other words, they have subjective experiences. So we're shifting things. We're shifting the way we're thinking slowly but surely, but we're still leaning on science to kind of prove it for us. And how can we break away from that and just trust that we are nature, everything is nature, and nature is sentient. And that's part of the work that we'll do in this class. In the next section, we'll talk more about that. So we were born knowing intuitively that we are nature and everything is sentient. Unfortunately, it was repressed in us by society, but you probably remember as a child talking to bugs or maybe a tree or your pets or plants. And that was just completely natural thing for you to do. You didn't think it was weird until somebody told you it was. You might recall communicating with inorganic, inanimate objects like dolls, toys, or pictures. But people just told you, you were being imaginative. And so when you look back, maybe that's how you see it. You just see it as play. But at the time, you might have really believed that. I really believed that my stuffies, my stuffed animals, were sentient when I was a child, and that they were protecting me and watching over me, and that they were my friends. I really deeply believed that, and I remember it. And then that was taught to me that that's not true. That's just my imagination. I'm just a child. I'm just playing, right? Did you have invisible friends? Or did you see fairies when you were little? Again, people told you it wasn't real. Do you remember adults telling you that you were so imaginative, or to stop being childish or something like that, just to demonstrate to you that your actions were not valued? For one, it wasn't valuable for you to play, to make things up, to play, pretend nature's real or fairies are real, and that it wasn't real. It's just not real. That's not reality. But maybe it was. If truth is subjective, then maybe those were your real lived experiences. You might remember ones that were very real to you, in fact. All right, so for the end of this lesson, I'm offering you this journal prompt if you'd like to do it. What is your earliest memory of nature? Maybe something I said in the last slide prompted a memory for you, and I invite you to write about it. And I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks.